Inflammatory, Jiggery, Pokery and Intolerant statistics. Welcome to part 3 of my report of my recent GTCS case. If you're not familiar with the case, I suggest you go back and start with video number 1 in this series. Now, I'm not here to embarrass individuals, so I won't say who said this, but at one point in the proceedings, I asked someone, was there anything intolerant about my video? And they replied that they thought the statistics were intolerant. How about that then? Sets of numbers somehow express intolerance. Now, the statistics in question were from the New Family Structures study by Mark Regnerus, and I showed some of that in my video, which showed inferior outcomes for children with same-sex parents, and I commentated on the statistics, on the results of that survey during my video. Now, during the cross-examination by GTCS's solicitor, she said things like, why did you use a study that was 6 years old? I mean, 6 years old? That's not particularly old for a sociological study. I mean, I didn't quote something like from the 1920s or something, 6 years ago. I mean, a society really revolutionized to such an extent in 6 years. So that's a completely non-point. But then she went on to say, did I realize that this study had been challenged by 250 academics who wrote a letter? Did I realize that the peer review process had been criticized? Did I realize that people say the statistics weren't done properly, etc., etc.? So eventually I could see the line of questioning. So I said, yeah, I realize the way Mark Regnerus was treated, but let me explain what happens. Academic sociology is hyper-liberal, hyper-left-wing, secular, progressive. That's just the nature of sociology departments in universities. So when someone breaks the mold and they actually say something like this, they get hammered. And the other academics, or a lot of them in any case, sort of gang up on them and attack them in every possible way, professionally, academically, in the media, just whatever weapons to hand, they attack them with it. And I said to the panel, I said, it's a bit like what's happening to me. You see, the same phenomenon that resulted in Mark Regnerus being professionally attacked for producing this research that said the wrong thing, then it's the same as me. I'm sitting here before this panel fighting for my career because I also said the same thing. So basically I explained that this is a controversy within the world of sociology. I talked about this book, The Sacred Project of American Sociology by Christian Smith, published by Oxford University Press. And I said in this book, Mr. Smith, Professor Smith, I think, actually talks about the controversy relating to Mark Regnerus's work and the way it was attacked in a completely unfair manner. So I said, am I here being charged with taking the wrong side in a dispute within the academic world of sociology? That doesn't really sound like a striking off offence to me. Now, one of the phrases that the solicitor seemed to love was in the video I referred to statistical jiggery pokery. And during her question of me, she asked me whether or not I thought that was an inflammatory phrase to use. Statistical jiggery pokery. I mean, that really is inciting mob violence, isn't it? I mean, you're probably feeling like lighting a torch and going and throwing a stone through someone's window as we speak, having heard that phrase, statistical jiggery pokery. To explain what I meant with it, what happens in sociological research is they get the raw data, then there are various statistical techniques that can be used in analysing it, and there are some decisions to be made, and there's some grey areas, room for discretion. So I would argue that the liberal sociology establishment tends to choose statistical techniques that mask the negative outcomes related to same-sex parenthood, whereas they would claim that Mark Regnerus in his study did various things wrong. Okay, so that's what I meant by statistical jiggery pokery. So I was asked if I thought that was an inflammatory phrase to use. I mean, frankly, what a joke. It's just laughable and ridiculous that I had to sit there fighting for my career with the General Teaching Council of Scotland, being asked whether what I thought of using the phrase statistical jiggery pokery. It got worse. I also said that these sociological researchers, they control for one thing or another, by which I mean in sociological research you can get your data, but controlling for one variable or another means that you try and take into account different factors to try and isolate what's really making the difference. So, for example, if you find results that show outcomes for children of same-sex parents are not as good, what you could do is control for relationship instability. Maybe if you control for relationship instability, then it will seem that they've been with the same-sex parent family might not be the issue. But then, of course, you could come back and say, but the reason the relationship instability is greater is because they're same-sex families. There's that correlation. So there's some tricky issues to work through there. During my video, I said that in order to mask the results, they control for one thing or another. And in my cross-examination, the solicitor said, did I think it was inflammatory to use the term controlling for one thing or another? To which I said, you're really scraping the barrel here. I mean, this is so ridiculous and bizarre. I said, I can't even be bothered answering the question. You just go on to the next question, please. Then later on, when this was brought up, I said, am I supposed to hang my head in shame for using the phrase controlling for one thing or another? It was frankly laughable. I actually asked the solicitor, I said, do you understand what it means to control for a variable? But she obviously didn't answer. At other points, they said, what you're saying is that they deliberately manipulate the data. I said, yes. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, yes. Are you going to strike me off for that? Criticising some sociologists? I'm not being charged with being cheeky to the academic social science establishment. But anyway, I mean, it was just unbelievable. I couldn't believe the absolutely pitiful, feeble points that were being put to me. I mean, part of the allegations against me was that my manner was inflammatory at some points in this video. So I said, why were no clips shown? No clips were shown, and no one pointed at the screen and said, right, that was it. That's where he was inflammatory. The bit where I angrily shook my fist or banged the desk or pointed my finger aggressively at the screen. I mean, they didn't bring any up. They didn't show any clips because there aren't any. Right, continuing with the theme of comedy, just listen to this. In the video, I made a humorous aside in that Nicola Sturgeon said that she would be sending a baby box to Ruth Davidson, or a baby box would be being sent to Ruth Davidson. Now, a baby box includes condoms. And I just said, if Nicola Sturgeon wants to send Ruth Davidson a box with some condoms in, then that's up to her. Joke, obviously, being a lesbian couple don't need condoms. So that was that. Okay, just a humorous aside. By the time you've had to explain it in great detail, like 10 times over, it doesn't seem very funny anymore. But anyway, at the time, it was just a humorous aside. And their solicitor said to me, would you have made the same joke about a heterosexual couple? I'm not joking. I'm not joking. This is serious. The solicitor asked me, would I have made that same joke about a heterosexual couple? I mean, did she not get the joke? Does she not realise that lesbians don't need condoms for contraception, whereas a heterosexual couple might do? I mean, it's comedy. How anyone could even begin to ask that question. The idea was that I would say, no, I wouldn't make that joke about a heterosexual couple. And she'd be able to say, discrimination. You're treating people differently. I mean, if anyone can't see that line of argument is just utterly absurd, then I give up. Now, during the course of the hearing, and this idea about, inflammatory, offensive language, whatever, I did say to the panel, I said, look, I quite accept the right of the General Teaching Council of Scotland to bring teachers before it and to take action against them on the basis of their, offensive and inflammatory comments, if they've actually made any. For example, a teacher was struck off a few years ago now for calling Nicola Sturgeon a drooling hag. Now, I don't know the details of the case. I don't know whether I agree she should have been struck off or not. But I would say calling someone a drooling hag, that's out of order. And that's the sort of thing where it would be acceptable for the General Teaching Council of Scotland to say, well, hang on a minute, this language is unbecoming of someone representing our profession. So I made that perfectly clear. But I also said, but what we're dealing with here is not offensive, insulting and inflammatory language. Just be honest. The real issue is you don't like me stating what amounts to the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church and other religions and denominations in Scotland. Now, today, the General Teaching Council of Scotland has issued a statement about my case on its website and on social media. Listen to this. This is very enlightening indeed. Fitness to Teach hearing. Commenting on last week's Fitness to Teach case, which is mine, A GTC Scotland spokesperson said, GTC Scotland is currently unable to comment on the fitness to teach hearing, which has followed a legal process. Right, that's a great comment, is it? So our comment is that we can't comment. But then goes on to say, fitness to teach panels are made up of independent members, and the panel's decision, along with its reasoning, will be published on the GTC Scotland website as soon as it is available. Now, I feel there's maybe even a shade that they're saying, look, don't blame us who's got off the hook. It's the panel's fault. It could seem to be just saying that. Almost, if they are a bit embarrassed or apologetic that I've been allowed to walk free, so to speak, they're just emphasising this wasn't the General Teaching Council of Scotland's decision, it was the panel. And then that is absolutely the case. The General Teaching Council of Scotland were instructing the solicitor to press the allegations and come to the conclusion that I was unfit to teach. That's what GTCS was pushing for, but the panel took a different view. And the reason for that, I don't know. It's not necessarily that the panel had different views or a broader understanding of these issues than GTCS before the hearing, but I think ultimately GTCS's case couldn't stand up in open debate. How many times do I say this in Scotland? You just wish you could have the opportunity to sit across a table from people and actually debate these things face to face, and you're sure their arguments would fall to bits and the strength of our position would be very clear. But people run away from it. Ian Blackwood ran away from the opportunity from it in the election campaign. If I could sit down with John Swinney for half an hour and talk about his sex education materials, he'd be finished. He would be finished, and he knows it, therefore he avoids it. That's what happens here. You have open discussion, and the absurdity of the GTCS's position became apparent to the panel. Right, carrying on with their comments on the case. The refreshed and revised Professional Standards for Teachers 2021, which will be formally enacted on the 2nd of August, now include a section called Being a Teacher in Scotland. This continues to highlight that the professional values of social justice, trust and respect and integrity are at the heart of what it means to be a teacher in Scotland. Equality and diversity is embedded within these values. Right, why do they bother saying that? It's almost, it could seem like they were saying, so if anyone else is thinking of saying the same thing as Lucas said, just bear in mind that we're ready to come down on you, because we've got all these buzzwords ready and you know what we mean by them. You know what we mean by equality and diversity, social justice, etc. These are politically loaded terms, and we're going to discriminate against people who don't agree with our side of the argument on them. It really sounds that way to me. Right, they carry on. Our Equality and Diversity Hub contains a professional guide for teachers together with professional learning materials which provides support for teachers to reflect on their understanding of equality and diversity. Okay, what's that got to do with it? Why be drawing attention to these things? These are the parts of GTCS. These are the aspects of GTCS that I was objecting to. This is the area where they push their political, social philosophy and impose it on teachers. So they're drawing attention to it, continuing to push in the same direction. Now, I would have hoped at some point the statement might say, we've reflected on this case and we've realised that basically is right. We're intolerant of a diversity of opinion. We only accept a range of opinion that doesn't stray too far from that of the Scottish Government. We're really sorry. We've realised that we shouldn't do that, and we're going to now change the way that we operate. But not in the slightest. Those last two paragraphs are just code for saying, well, effectively, look, sorry about this case, but don't forget, we are still hyper woke, and if you're teaching in Scotland, you'd better be as well. Right, so don't miss part 4 of this series, which is entitled Punishing Process and Hollow Victory. That will be out in a day or two. I think I'm going to be on The 9, BBC Scotland The 9 o'clock tomorrow evening, talking about this case as well. So do tune in to that. Okay, thanks for watching.